How does a 63-year-old mother of three, grandmother of six, who has never been in any sort of trouble end up in a Hong Kong prison accused of smuggling the white stuff that goes up your nose into the country? A romance scammer. This is a cautionary tale and hopefully a story that we can all learn a lesson from. If this could happen to Suzana Thayer, this could happen to any of us, especially the ones that are blinded by love. So let's talk about it. Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. Truly, truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so because it really helps me out and I really, really appreciate it. So, 63-year-old Suzana Thayer lived in Barrie, Ontario, Canada, which is located about 56 miles north of Toronto. She met her husband Jim when she was 13 years old and he was 12. Then the two would date and they would end up marrying 4 days after Jim's 18th birthday. And they stayed married for 45 years until Jim passed away in his sleep in December of 2016. Both sides of the family were very much against this marriage and they did not support them in any way. Suzana's daughter would say that her dad, who was a police officer, sheltered her mother from a lot. He was an officer that wanted to keep his family as protected as possible. Suzana says that while Jim was a police officer, he got a bad head injury. She says that that changed him as a person and that he became ABUSC afterwards. Going on to say that he became extremely jealous and only allowed her to go to work, the grocery store, and the liquor store. Needless to say, Suzana had very few life experiences and this would end up affecting her in a seriously bad way. In the spring of 2021, Suzana received a Facebook message from a very handsome man that she would later nickname the Good Doctor. When Suzana questioned how he found her, he told her that he was looking for a relative online, stumbled across her profile, and just knew that they were meant to be together. Okay. So here's the thing with online dating. I think that you can absolutely find the love of your life on these apps. And for the older generations that don't go hang out at bars, it may be the only way that you'll ever meet somebody. On the flip side of this, those sites are crawling with shitty people and scammers. Most of them out for one thing, your money. They make you believe that you're the most beautiful person in the world and that they can't live without you. They tell you that the two of you are going to have this amazing life. You're going to ride off into the sunset in a horse-driven carriage and live a wealthy, amazing life. The life of your dreams, right? Just as soon as they're able to come back from the dead, escape the slaughterhouse they're being held in, and flee the foreign country that they're trapped in. You believe that this love is real, and you would do anything to have the love of your life in your arms so that you guys can live happily ever after. Besides, it's just money, right? And your love promised you that he was going to pay back every red cent to you with interest because he has lots of money. They always do. And he loves you and he wants to marry you. And you have absolutely no reason to not believe him, right? Wrong. So wrong. The first man that stood out to Suzana was a man by the name of Walter Williams. He told Suzana that he was a military doctor, more specifically a neurosurgeon. He was 63 years old, just like Suzana, and he had lost his spouse, just like Suzana. The Good Doctor said that he lost his wife and daughter in a tragic car accident but that it was too difficult for him to talk about. He told her that he worked for the United Nations and that he was on a mission in Syria. Shortly after they began talking, he told her that he couldn't stay on Facebook because of the terrorists. And he insisted that they chat in Hangouts because that site is used by the military and he knows that it is safe. Okay, guys, please make this your first red flag always. He told her that he was incredibly rich, that he had many homes, that he would send her pictures of, and that he would never ask her for any money. He told her that after his wife and daughter passed, he signed a 9-year agreement with the United Nations, and that he already served 6 of the 9 years. The good doctor would send her messages daily telling her how beautiful she was and how God put them together, saying it was God's will that they found each other. It was only 4 years into their marriage when Jim suffered the head injury during a police baseball game. After the injury, Suzana claims that Jim became a closet drunk and a nasty drunk. His addiction would become so bad that there were many days that she would have to drive him to work, probably just to keep him off the road so that he didn't kill anybody, God forbid. So when the good doctor began saying such wonderful things to her, this really played on her emotions because she was never shown this type of love before, even if it was just over text. The two would talk for hours, and within a month they were saying I love you to each other, and by this point Suzana was very much in love. Suzana stopped going on Facebook, she stopped watching TV, and most importantly, she stopped paying attention to her family and friends. Suzana promised her family and friends that she would never send Walter money, but that was a lie. A lie that would be exposed when she was forced to go to her children to borrow $1,500. Not long after meeting, the good doctor told Suzana he wanted to try and get relieved from his duties with the United Nations so that he could come to Canada and be with Suzana. Then the initial request for money that he would never ask her for came. The good doctor asked Suzana to write a letter on his behalf asking the United Nations to grant him a leave. Okay, no big deal, right? Like, what harm could that cause? The worst that could happen would be the request would be refused and Suzana would get an arm crimp. And Suzana would get an arm crimp from the handwritten letter. About a week after this request, the good doctor told her that she would need to pay $16,000 Canadian for the request to be processed. She accused him of being a con artist and even blocked him for 2 days afterwards. But Suzana was in love, so it was incredibly easy for him to convince her to take him back after he sent her a very charming email. Suzana agreed to pay the money. About 2 weeks after the letter went out, Suzana received a letter back from the United Nations stating that the good doctor was very well respected and that his leave would be granted for $13,000. So at this point, Suzana and the good doctor were sexting at least twice a day, and Suzana was in love. The good doctor tells Suzana that because he's a valued member of the United Nations, he would have to hire security to fly to be with her. The cost for the security for the good doctor to arrive in Canada safe was $26,000. Suzana believed that she deserved to be happy. She does. And thought that if this was going to get him to her safely, then it was worth it. It's not. Then the letter from the United Nations stated that they have very strict protocols and the only way they could release the good doctor would be if they were married. So they speak in the letter about a marriage by proxy and say that this can be performed for $16,000. Suzana was in love. She wanted to be married to the good doctor, so she agreed to pay the proxy for the marriage. Suzana didn't hear anything more from the United Nations for a while. Then one day she gets an email. The email states that in order for them to release their very respected doctor, it would cost $95,000 for his consignment box, which includes all of his banking information and 6 to 7 of his medals. It also said that the $95,000 would go towards the $1.2 million that was owed to her because she was his wife. The second part of the letter says that he was under arrest for unpaid taxes and that she would have to pay $200,000 in order to get him out. It went on to say that because she was his legal wife, she was also responsible for the payment of the back taxes. Oh, God. Digging, Suzana's children would find out that their mother had taken loans out to send to Walter, loans that equaled more than $205,000. Her kids would also come across a marriage certificate that stated her and Walter were married. A police investigation would determine that the marriage was fake and there was really no way that she was ever going to see her money again. So, broke and alone, she was forced to move into her daughter's spare bedroom, which is actually her house because she sold her house to her daughter. So she moved into the spare bedroom of the old home that she shared with her husband. Alone and broken and sleeping next to a picture of Jim, Suzana decides that it's time to take back her life. So she begins researching romance scams and she decides to write a book titled I've Been Conned. That's when she meets a man by the name of James Kaywood. James was a special ops military man that lived in California. Suzana would email James transcripts of her book and James would review the book. Then in March of 2022, James was set to travel to Canada to visit Suzana. But right before the visit was about to take place, James tells her that something has come up and that he is no longer able to go visit her. A year into James and Suzana talking, in August of 2022, he tells her that he wants to send her on an all-expenses-paid trip. On August 11th, 2022, plane tickets arrive for a flight to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And the following morning, Suzana gets on a plane to what she believes will be the chance for her to finally meet the new love of her life. After she lands, there's a driver waiting for her at the airport. She's brought to a fully furnished apartment-like hotel in an upscale part of the city. Suzana would spend 3 weeks in Ethiopia, and it is said that she had a great time. She made friends with the hotel staff, she enjoyed the beautiful weather, and she went sightseeing. The only thing missing from her trip was James Kaywood. However, 2 men would visit Suzana in Ethiopia repeatedly on behalf of James.
First for sale, by the looks of it too.
A journalist by the name of Sam Getachew began working with Suzana's family, and he would later determine that the 2 men were not locals, but more likely from Nigeria. 3 weeks into the trip, Suzana's tourist visa is expiring and it's time for her to go home back to Canada. That's when James calls her and tells her that rather than go back to Canada, he wanted to fly her on an 11-hour trip from Ethiopia to Hong Kong and promised her that they would meet up there. Suzana's best friend Sue warned her not to take anything from anyone with her to Hong Kong. Hours before Suzana was ready to leave, the 2 men in the car show up to Suzana's room with a suitcase full of new clothes for Suzana. So at this point, Suzana is still not thinking anything is strange. She says she felt like a princess and she felt that God was finally working in her favor because of what she had just experienced with Walter Williams. She even wore one of the new outfits on the plane. After she touches down in Hong Kong, Suzana gets her luggage and she begins to try and find where to go next. Airport, the suitcase breaks. Two women help Suzana pick up her belongings and direct her where to go. But before leaving, her bag is scanned by the employees, and that's when everything goes to shit. Suzana is placed under arrest after Hong Kong officials find the white stuff hidden in 262 buttons on the clothing. Buttons, isn't that crazy? Like, what will they think of next? I was mind-fucked when I heard buttons. White stuff that equals 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds, and it's equivalent to $150,000 in Canadian currency. A report from Customs reads in part, I examined the gray check-in suitcase and there was a number of long dresses. A number of large circular buttons on each of the dresses. I found that the dresses were abnormally heavy. With the use of a sharp-tipped spike, I poked the 7th button of the purple-red pattern dress and found white powder therein. I used the spike to poke the button of a red flower-patterned long dress and also found white powder therein. I retrieved the white powder for a narcotic test and the result yielded positive for Hong Kong officials make the story public and release a picture of Suzana being transported with a hood over her head. Suzana would spend 3 days at the airport being interviewed by authorities. When you listen to Suzana speak to authorities, it is absolutely clear to me that James and Walter are the same exact person, and that Suzana truly believes in her heart that James really is who he says that he is. And it's so incredibly sad.
If it wasn't for James Kaywood, I would have had a hard time finishing my book. He ended up trying to come see me twice. The first time he ended up having COVID, so he couldn't make it. The second time he was going to the airport in a taxi, and 2 gentlemen apparently tried to shoot him. The taxi driver ran out of the car, got shot. He went down and was okay, but they ended up catching the 2 guys and found out that it was Dr. Williams Walter who ended up creating the thing to stop him from coming to me.
For William Waters, it's not related into this case, right? Like, doesn't relate it at all for this case, for your trip to Hong Kong.
Oh, in a sense, I think in the back of my mind, I was hoping that maybe I might bump into him because I told him, I did tell him, I said, I'd rather you look me right in the eye and stab me yourself, because he threatened my family, he threatened me, and I was just hoping. James didn't know about it, but in the back of my mind, I was hoping that Dr. Williams Walter would have
related to this case, but the truth is not, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you describe the relationship for James and you, between James?
Very close. He's totally into me. He loves me with all his heart and soul. If you read any of his texts or his messages on my phone, I'm into him. He wants to marry me as soon as he sees me. He's hoping to be here in Hong Kong.
She tells authorities that while she was in Ethiopia, James was stationed in Indonesia. After James tried to meet her and failed twice, Suzana told him that she would go to where he was, even if it was in a war zone. She didn't care, she just wanted to be with him. Suzana would spend 3 days handcuffed and interviewed at the airport. After this, she was transported to a medium security correctional facility called Lo Wu. Suzana says that while she was being interrogated, she was denied her blood pressure pills, cholesterol pills, and pain pills. She would end up being sent to the hospital as a result of this. And at one point, she tells the interrogator, "This is torture," to which he smiles and replies, "Yes, it is." Suzana would actually be taken to the hospital repeatedly over the course of a month after one doctor determined that she didn't need any medication because it was all, quote, in her head. She tells a story about how you must stand at attention in your full prison gear when the head madam walks by. One time the head madam walked by and Suzana was not standing, but she was sitting down in her underwear. The head madam walked over to her, screamed at her to get up, stand at attention, and to get better. She says the next thing she knew, she was in the hospital. Suzana also says that about 10% of the women that were in the prison with her are innocent of similar crimes. She tells one story about a woman who's serving 20 years for bringing a book to Hong Kong that her boyfriend asked for her to bring. But what she didn't know was that inside of the book, there were drugs. Another woman was in there for bringing Christmas ornaments that contained drugs into Hong Kong for someone. Then she goes on to speak about the jail itself. She calls the jail deplorable. She says that there were 15 people with her in a cell. The person sleeping next to her was a convicted murderer. The beds were plastic coffee tables with a couple of blankets. She was only allowed to go outside for 10 minutes a day. Visits are daily, but they're only 15 minutes long. And she's only allowed one phone call a month. Then, for reasons that are never truly explained, after 274 days in prison, Suzana is released from the prison system and sent back home to Canada. It's speculated that because a huge news source covered Suzana's story, this helped officials come to the conclusion that she was innocent and it was better to just release her. They probably didn't want the bad publicity either. However, this has never been confirmed, and Hong Kong officials will not speak on the matter. But I suppose that doesn't matter anyway, because all that matters at this point is moving forward and putting this all behind her and hopefully learning a very valid lesson. To you guys, be safe out there, please, and don't ever give anybody money. I know, who am I to, but just don't. All right, if you guys are still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you, and I appreciate you so, so, so very much. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet, and you feel so inclined to. And until next time, stay safe out there.